Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Much as I was tempted to talk about the two major reforms, so two mega course corrections carried out by Modi government on the economy, one on telecom and the other on bad loans in banks, particularly public sector banks, I am not doing it. And I'm not doing it for two good reasons. One, I know that over the past couple of days, you've been hearing it, reading it, watching it non-stop. Ministers have been giving interviews, press conferences, business channels have been debating this, other channels also have been debating this and mostly praising this. So I presume that all of you understand this quite well. Also, we've talked about some of these problems in the past. And second, I thought that because there's been so much analysis and discussion on it already, maybe I need to spend also a bit more time now to understanding the nuances of it. So when I come back to you with this, I bring something new to the table, which I'll try to do next week, particularly with the case of telecom, which I think is a much bigger reform. I would stay, in fact, on this Friday with the theme that we picked up yesterday, that is Thursday, in our episode 836. That is the strategic picture, the way it is changing, how rapidly it's changing and evolving generally around our region, to the east as well as to the west. That is east. When I say east, generally I mean east and south, that is the Indo-Pacific region. When I say west, this is Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then the Islamic world from there, Central Asia, etc., etc. I will also talk about some fascinating contradiction or debate that has now arisen because of the statements of two key leaders of our official strategic community. That is Modi government's official strategic community. That is our Minister for External Affairs and our Chief of Defense Staff, who both made a reference to clash of civilizations. That I will refer to towards the conclusion of this episode. So please hang on. I will speak about it briefly because there is something else that gives us some wisdom and some insight into where each one is coming from and what is it that matters more. Now, first of all, staying on with the south and east of India, that is the Indo-Pacific region, which used to be called Asia-Pacific generally, but now more popularly Indo-Pacific, and I think we in India would definitely now stick forever with Indo-Pacific. Now, in the Indo-Pacific region, in yesterday's Cut the Clutter, that is 836, we talked about AUKUS, the agreement under which Australia will now be able to build its nuclear submarines with American and British help. AUKUS, as we had mentioned to you, kept New Zealand, Canada, and Japan out, which are otherwise part of the same larger strategic alliance and have American security guarantees, simply because each one has issues about anything nuclear. That said, is there something more happening there? So first of all, we have a little more clarity now about what Australia is going to do with these submarines and how many is Australia going to build. So let me get that out of the way first. So there is an article on IISS.org, that is the International Institute for Strategic Studies .org, leading global think tank. They have an article by their Senior Fellow for Asia Pacific Security, Ewan Graham, that in fact gives us the numbers. It says that Australians now plan to build in the next 10-12 years about 8 SSNs, 8 nuclear-powered submarines, not nuclear weapon, nuclear-powered submarines. 8 of them, which is one more than the UK currently has and 2 more than France currently has. So it's a lot of nuclear-powered submarines, and this is in these waters. These are in Indo-Pacific waters. These don't have to come from far away from Europe or from America. So for the Chinese, it's a lot of nuclear submarines to look at. So that is how this will change the balance of power in the seas or under the seas in this region. So now we have a little more clarity on this. Second important thing is that Defense Minister of Japan has spoken out. Japanese don't speak out very much on these issues. They are they speak in a very carefully cultivated tone and they don't give out very much. But increasingly we have seen the Japanese officials now tending to be more aggressive and more upfront, and they state some hard facts also quite clearly, much more clearly than before. Maybe that's also because they face a little danger, or they have a sense of danger. The Defense Minister of Japan, Nobuo Kishi, has given a wide-ranging interview to CNN, of which I am sharing a link with you. In that interview, he's talked about his country's problems with China, territorial problems over Senkaku Island. Now, Senkaku Islands is an issue that we had spoken about in an earlier episode of Cut the Clutter, of which I will share a link with you for reference. You can go back to it. Senkaku Islands are about 5 islands of some size, but all uninhabited, and a bunch of rocky outcrops. So the Chinese say that this is about 71. They count every little outcrop, maybe something that's even a few meters below the water. They claim these are all theirs. Chinese actually have a name for them. They call them Diao Islands. Japanese have claims to them. As of now, the de facto situation is that these are more in the Japanese control than in the Chinese control, although nobody lives there. But there are tricky issues there. These are less distant from China than from Japan. They are about 2,000 kilometers, say, from Tokyo, but just less than 700 kilometers, say, from Shanghai. Also, because these are uninhabited, whoever has more vessels around these islands can always claim that these are mine. So the Chinese have been sending a lot of patrol ships to these islands, and these patrol ships then get into the 12 nautical mile zone of these islands of the coast, which means into what Japan considers its own territorial waters. But the Chinese say, what the hell? These are our own territorial waters. And this year already, in the first 8 months of this year, the Japanese have noted 88 Chinese incursions into Senkaku Islands territorial waters, which they consider their own. So the Japanese defense minister in this case has spoken in a very upfront way, and he has said that Japan has no intention of letting the Chinese get away with it. This is a Chinese method, that is show presence, increase presence, then start dominating an area, then claim ownership of the area. Frankly, that is what the Chinese have tried to do with India as well, with our country, with the same policy of salami slicing. Go a little bit ahead, then say we've always been here, right? So possession is half of ownership. So that's what the Japanese think the Chinese are trying to do. And now they are saying that we will have more coastal vessels than the Chinese can ever put out in the waters, which is making a big claim. But they are saying that we will match the Chinese there, ship for ship. Also, ship for ship and beyond, in fact, the exact line. Also, Japan is now also investing a lot more in its military modernization, its military numbers. Obviously, it can't match China. China is a much bigger power and much bigger military. But Japan also is investing a lot more and also dusting up its agreements and security with the Americans. Because for the Japanese, if you look at the map of this part of the world on the screen, and we'll enlarge it for you so you can understand. Japanese say, in fact, the Japanese defense minister underlines the fact that almost 90% of all energy that is imported by Japan, because Japan imports all its energy, that 90% of all the energy that Japan imports comes around the island of Taiwan. And you can see how the sea routes are. Now that area, China already lays claims to Taiwan. In fact, they've been ratcheting up tension with Taiwan, which leads to Americans sometimes complaining and sometimes pulling back. The thrust and parry goes on. But Taiwan uncertainty always continues. And the Japanese have now underlined also that they also have a stake in Taiwan's security, Taiwan's independent status, and also they see a threat in Chinese control over Taiwan. Why? Because again, if you see this map again, and we'll expand the map for you on the screen, just close to Taiwan, the last island, the southernmost island that the Japanese own, that is the island of Yonaguni. It's an 11 square kilometer island with about 2,000 people. Just before that is also island of Ishikagi, which is a resort island. Now, Yonaguni is just 63 miles or 110 kilometers from Taiwan. So much closer to Taiwan than, say, from the island of Kyushu, which is the most southern or southwestern island in Japan, which is about 1100 kilometers. So this is very close to Taiwan, and these are the waters that the Japanese are really neurotic about. They don't want the Chinese messing with these waters, and that's why Senkakus are so important, because you know what happens? Because once you say this island is mine, then you say these are my territorial waters, then you say this is my exclusive economic zone, and so thereby you can say all these seas are mine. And you know how the Chinese are. If they find a rock even 20 meters below the ground, they will then bring in their big infrastructure building machinery and conjure up new islands and air bases, as they've done in South China Sea. So Japan does not want to see in East China Sea what is already being done in South China Sea. And that is what the Japanese are worried about. The Chinese, of course, say, what the hell is this? This is purely an inherent part of Chinese territory. So the Chinese trace their territory from God knows which past. They choose whatever suits them. And that is where the Japanese have also now spoken out, although they are not part of AUKUS, and it's a message. Nobody is going to war with anybody, but it's a message. And why is this happening? That's not difficult to understand. Australia, Japan, the Philippines has now dusted up its military agreement with America, and Americans have given it fresh assurances. This is because of two reasons. One, because China's military rise has taken place much faster than anybody had imagined, including India. Even India had not imagined that Chinese military rise will be this rapid, this fast, that they will build such a gap, but they have. So Japan, India, Vietnam, Australia, the Philippines, every country is now realizing that China is militarily become much too powerful, and China is impatient. It's flexing its muscles. Xi Jinping wants to be the king forever, and this China is a state that will push at its frontiers, and that will push at states in its neighborhood, and that's what's happening. The second reason it's happening is a perception that America is weaker, because for a lot of these countries, America is a security provider or security guarantor. Japan, for example, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand. But does America have it in its guts to be able to deliver on that? I don't know. The debate is still on. And even if you don't see this debate with eyes or with vision colored by what happened in Kabul, in Afghanistan, forget those shambles there. But again, you see some doubt and some near prevarication every now and then. The latest being this tweet that Antony Blinken, the US Secretary of State, put out promising American support for Hong Kong, and then he deleted it and then replaced it with something much milder and much more diplomatically worded. This has been noted in the whole world, but particularly in this region. And in this region, it is therefore that countries like Australia, Japan, and India and others are also looking at this new situation and strengthening themselves. Even Taiwan is doing that. Taiwan's leader said that Taiwan has to invest a lot more in its own defense. In fact, I read much discussion in Taiwan about the need for Taiwan to become a porcupine. You know what a porcupine is? So if you step on a porcupine, you get cut all over. So nobody wants to step on a porcupine. So there is a theory that was first put forward by Admiral James Stavridis, who's now a writer, who's written a book, 2034, the Next World War. But he was this allied commander in Europe. He was the NATO commander. He's a scholar admiral. So he said, in fact, that Taiwan should become a porcupine, so Chinese will think twice before stepping onto it. And Taiwanese leaders are also talking about this now, strengthening themselves militarily to deter the Chinese instead of just depending on the Americans. So that is the big change that's come about in the region. And now this interesting little debate which has popped up in our country, sort of intellectual / strategic debate. And what insight can we give you on that? Now, what happened was that our Chief of Defense Staff, General Rawat, he made a speech where he said that there is evidence or there is a possibility that Sinic civilization, that is the Chinese civilization, and the Islamic civilization could get together in a new clash of civilizations with the Western civilization. Now, you know that thought of clash of civilizations goes back to Samuel Huntington's old book, which led to a big debate, which was joined in from the other side by Edward Said, and which has divided the academic, intellectual, strategic community for decades now. We had also mentioned to you that Fareed Zakaria, who knows more about Samuel Huntington than any of us, he had said that clash of civilization now has to be seen differently. There was no clash between the Western civilization and the Islamic civilization. This was a clash within the Islamic civilization, and I will come to that. So General Rawat said, now it looks like the Islamic civilization and the Sunni civilization have come together and they will fight the West. Now this has obviously come because he has looked at Afghanistan, Taliban called China their best friend, Pakistan calls Taliban their best friend, Pakistan calls Taliban their bachas, Talibans at this point are not questioning that. So he's conflated then Afghanistan and Pakistan and maybe even Iran to some extent to mean the Islamic civilization. Our foreign minister, external affairs minister, Jai Shankar, however, in Dushanbe, where the Chinese foreign minister is present and where the Russian, Iranian, Pakistani foreign ministers are also present, he said there that India does not believe in any theory of clash of civilizations. That came, in fact, within hours of our CDS's speech. I'm not saying one is responding to the other, but it opens up a very interesting debating point. Is there a clash of civilization? Is there not a clash of civilizations? Is there a clash of civilizations between the Islamic world and the Western world, as was imagined earlier, or between an Islamic plus Sinic, that is a Chinese, not CYNIC, SINIC, Chinese world? Now, look at the evidence coming from the Islamic world, and that is an eye-opener. Just this week, a fresh election has taken place in Morocco. In Morocco, the Islamist party, which had won power twice, it has been wiped out. It has been wiped out from 125 seats to 12 seats. So people have actually rejected Islamism in such an important and powerful Muslim country. And you see this all over. You see countries like Saudi Arabia, UAE, in fact, the entire Gulf not backing the Taliban. Iranians also are very, very qualified in their backing. Iranians, in fact, are the only country to have issued official statements criticizing Pakistan for intervening in Panjshir. So Iranians have a very nuanced foreign policy and very nuanced strategic policy. If the Iranians were not nuanced, they would not have survived this far. Iranians are among the cleverest diplomats you can find in the world. They live by their wits. So to now think that all the Muslim countries are coming together is wrong. To also think that all the Muslim countries and larger Muslim populations are now supporting the idea of Islamization and an Islamic war over the rest of the world is wrong. In fact, if you look at any evidence, it points exactly to the contrary. The Taliban victory in Afghanistan is not indicative of a trend. The Taliban victory in Afghanistan is an odd happening. It's an unusual happening, and it's happened because of factors which are local to Afghanistan, which have nothing to do with some civilizational Islamic, pan-Islamic forces, because those forces actually today are pointing in the opposite direction. I don't even see the Iranians getting involved in that.